Okay, this is the video tutorial that goes with test 7.1. And before we start, we're just going to review some of the key facts that we're going to need for when we're doing this test. So this is really about dividing and also factoring as well. So in particular with factoring, we're going to be looking at GCF. So we're going to just look at a factoring question first from lesson 7.1, because that actually focuses on how to find a GCF and how you find another factor. Now, the easiest way to find a factor with two numbers, so like 8 and negative 12 here, is literally just to type it into Desmos. If you type in GCF, parentheses with a comma between the two numbers, it will actually tell you what the GCF is. If you do it by hand, it's always possible you might miss this. Like you might recognize it's the 2 times table, but you might not spot the bigger times table. So GCF is a good way of doing this. Now, to find the greatest common factor with variables, what we look for is we actually look for the one that has the smaller variable. So even though it's called the greatest, we actually look for the least. So here the exponent's 3, here the exponent's 2. So clearly 2 is the smaller of the two. And then you put your two answers together, 4 and x squared. And that would be our greatest common factor. Now, as the question actually says factor, not just GCF, what we're trying to do is figure out what two things multiply together to make this. So once we've found one of the factors, the GCF, what we do is we take the question and then we divide by that GCF. So I've taken each term, divided it by 4x squared, and then I'm going to do numbers first, letters second. So 8 divided by 4 is 2. When I'm dividing with exponents, I subtract. So 3 take away 2 is 1. And as it's 1, we don't need to actually put anything there at all. Negative 12 divided by 4 is negative 3. And x squared divided by x squared, as it's the same, that will just cancel out. And there's your first factor, the GCF. And then this is the second factor. And we put it in parentheses to show that we're multiplying both of these terms by the 4x squared. Now, questions can get a little more complicated. If I have more than one variable, then it's the same idea. We start off with the GCF first. So the two numbers this time are negative 9 and 3. And it says the answer is 3 here, but we actually need to know when the GCF starts with a negative, then the actual GCF is going to be negative as well. That's just something that Desmos won't actually do. So on the last question, as the question started with a positive term, that's why we had a positive GCF. But if the question starts with a negative, then we're going to have a negative GCF. Do each letter in turn. So we'll do the x's first. So I can see that I have x. And I can see that I have x squared here. So the smaller of the two is clearly x. And then do the same for the y's. So I got y to the 5 and I got y to the 2. The smaller of those two is y to the 2. So when you put all that together, the GCF is negative 3, x and y squared. If the question says factor like this, then to find the second factor, we divide this by the factor that we already know. And that's what we're going to do on slide 6. So as we divide both those terms by negative 3xy squared, negative 9 divided by negative 3 is 3. X divided by x, as they're the same, will cancel. Y to the 5 divided by y squared is y cubed, subtracting the exponents here. 3 divided by negative 3 is negative 1. X squared divided by x. If you want to put a little 1 there to make sure you do 2 take away 1, which is 1, that's not a bad idea. What we definitely don't want to do is think of this as 0 and then do 2 take away 0 is 2. And then as the y squareds are the same, we can cancel those out. So I'm not going to put x to the power of 1. And for the same reason, negative 1x is just negative x. And there's my two factors, the GCF and the factor that I get from dividing. And then I can just put the two together in one question. Now, the last thing we looked at in lesson 7.2, we actually spent kind of a lot of time looking at algebra tiles first to see what was actually going on with these questions. And what we noticed is when we're dividing this trinomial, in this case, divided by a binomial, we linked it back to the grid questions. And what we actually noticed was it was actually only the squares that were important for these questions, the big x squareds and the little ones. The x's, which are the rectangles when we do algebra tiles, didn't actually play any part in this question at all. So what we noticed is we're trying to find the factors like here and here, or the two parts of the factor. And we notice we can work it out directly from here. So I know that 3 times 4 is 12. And I know x times x gives me x squared. And from here, I know 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. So I actually have my factor here, 4x minus 3. And I didn't need to know how many x's, where they went. Was it like 2 and negative 7? Was it 1 and negative 6? It didn't actually make any difference for this question. Now, sometimes this can be difficult if you're not good with tables. So rather than saying, what do we times this by to get this? What it's easier to say is, what do we divide this by to get this? And that's what you can see at the bottom here. And the same for this. Rather than saying 2 times what gives me -6, it's easier to say -6 divided by 2 because we can actually work that out. Now notice that these two terms here are exactly the first term, divided together, and also the last term is divided together as well. And the reason the x doesn't play any part in this as we're dividing is for the same reason it didn't play any part here. We can work out this answer without actually using that. And that's a summary of the lessons 7.1 and 7.2. And then now we can actually get into the test review questions. And we got some multiple choices to practice on as well here. So when I got a question that's dividing with just monomials, just one term, then we take each term and divide it by this monomial. Now this step here would not actually be done for you. I've just done this to speed things up a little bit. So 7 divided by 7 is 1. X divided by x, as it's the same, will cancel. And I'm subtracting the exponents here because I'm dividing. So 3 take away 1 is 2. Now I don't really need to put 1 y squared. I could just put y squared. And notice as we look at our answers here, I can already see it's between answers 2 and 4 because this says y cubed and this one says y to the 4th. Let me keep going with this. -14 divided by 7, you could use your calculator. X divided by x, as they're the same, they cancel. And y divided by y, as they're the same, cancel. And therefore we could pick out our answer. One thing to mention on this as well, because we don't normally talk about this too much in questions, don't worry about this assume the denominator is not 0. That's something they have to put in all questions. And the reason they have to put that is if we ever divide by 0, it's actually a real problem in math. If you don't believe it, go ahead, try it on a calculator. Try 5 divided by 0 and 3 divided by 0, and you'll see that it says error. So this is just something that's not necessarily relevant for this question to help us answer it, but it's something they have to put in the question to make sure it's a relevant question. Sometimes if you don't understand the statement, see if you can answer the question with what's given to you. So it says fully simplify. You understand what that means. So go ahead and focus on what you do know for this question. This question here, same thing, just divided by one term here, this monomial. So we're going to do this divided by this divided by this, and this divided by this. So we're going to do it for each of the terms. 15 divided by 3 is 5. I'm going to put my little 1 here. So x cubed divided by x to the 1 is going to be x to the 2, because I'm subtracting exponents. And once again, notice 50-50 straight away. Actually, after doing 15 divided by 3, it was a 50-50. So make sure you get this number part right at the start. That'll be important. 27 divided by 3 is 9. And 2 take away 1 is 1. So this is 9x to the power of 1. And I can already see that it's going to be this answer. -9 divided by 3 is -3. And the x's cancel. Remember, x to the power of 1, of course, is just x. So it is indeed this answer here. If the question is written in a slightly different format with division like this, then just go ahead and make it into the fraction question and then do each one as you're going along. 9 divided by 9 is 1. X to the 5 divided by x to the 2, subtract exponents, gives me x to the 3. Once again, do I really need the 1? Not really, but I at least know it's between these two answers. -27 divided by 9 is -3. Subtracting the exponents gives me x to the 1, which is just x. Still don't know the answer yet. 18 divided by 9 is 2, and now I do know the answer. And as the x squareds are the same here, they will cancel when we divide. A rectangular blanket, the area of the blanket is this, and the length of the blanket is this. What is the width of the blanket? Now, in the previous unit, we actually did questions involving areas of rectangles. So what we found is that if you multiply the two dimensions together, the width and the length, then it will actually tell you what the area is. Now, if we only want to know one of them, then what we're doing is we're rearranging this equation here. So instead of times in by the length, the opposite of times in by length is to divide by the length. And then for that reason, this would cancel. So the width is actually the area divided by the length. So it's the same thing we did earlier. Once we found the GCF to find the other factor, we divided. That's exactly what's going on here as well. So I went ahead and set the question up. I took each of these terms, divided it by this, and then now we can work out what that actually gives us. So 12 divided by 3 is 4. And notice again, I'm down to 2 answer choices already. So that's great. P cubed divided by p squared, 3 take away 2 is 1. 2 take away 1 is 1, subtracting those exponents again, and R are the same thing, so that would cancel. From here, -21 divided by 3 is -7, and in theory I could stop already because this is the only answer it could be. As the p's are the same, they cancel. As the q's are the same, they cancel. And 4 take away 1 would give me 3, which you can see up here. -9 divided by 3 is -3. 3 take away 2 is 1. There's p to the 1. And the q's would cancel being the same, and the r's would cancel being the same. So just to prove that it is that answer, but sometimes you don't have to do a whole question when it's multiple choice. Going back to fully factoring, so first thing we're looking for is we're looking for that GCF. Remember, we're trying to find two factors that multiply together to make this. So looking at the numbers first, GCF of 5 and 15. If we're not sure, we can just type it into Desmos. So GCF of 5 and 15, and you can see that it's 5. And I'm looking at x squared and x, and I'm looking for the smaller of the two. So that would clearly be x for this question. Now, even here, I can see straight away it's between C and D just from doing my first little part. To find what that second factor is, I'm going to go ahead and divide each of the terms by that GCF. So 5 divided by 5 is 1. X squared divided by x is x. You see that a lot in these two units, x squared divided by x. 15 divided by 5 is 3. And then the x and the x's will cancel because they're the same. And hopefully you can see that it's this answer here then. 1x is obviously just x. GCF for -9 and -36. I'm just going to use the same thing as it's already typed in. Now we have to remember this one though, with it being negative, although the leading term being negative, although the answer says positive, I know the answer is actually going to be negative, and you can actually see that by looking at the multiple choice answers. So we got -9. Look for the lower of the two exponents between 5 and 3. So that would be 3. Make that 9 look a little bit more like a 9 as well. So I'm going to divide both terms by, whoops, it says negative, so I'm going to make sure I divide by negative. -9n cubed, and I'm going to divide this one by -9n cubed. Apologies for the handwriting, really difficult to write on this touchpad. -9 divided by -9 is 1. N to the 5 over n cubed is n squared, subtracting the exponents again. -36 divided by -9 is 4. And then as they both say n cubed, that would cancel. And you can see it says +4, which means it's this one here. A lot of people sometimes just get careless, see the negative here, and then assume it's got to be the negative as well. But actually, it's a negative divided by a second negative. So that's why it's going to switch back to a positive. 3 terms this time, -8, 24, and -16. So GCF, -8, 16, and 24. It says 8. I think I got those numbers right. I switched the 24 and the 16 over, and actually it's supposed to be -16. The signs don't actually really matter too much. So 8, but as it started with a negative, I know that the answer is actually -8. So it looks like it's between these ones here. For the exponents, 6, 5, and 3. 3 is the smallest one, so I know it's between these 3 answers here. And then to find out which one it is, we're going to divide each term by, oops, -8a cubed, and do it for each one. And I'm hoping actually if I just do the first 2, that might be enough. -8 divided by -8 is 1. A to the 6 divided by a cubed, subtract the exponents. That will give me 3. So it's between these 2 already. 24 divided by -8 is -3, and that is actually enough for me to confirm it's this answer. 5 take away 3 is 2. And on the last one, if I also divide this by -8a cubed, -16 divided by -8 is 2, and a cubed and a cubed would cancel because they're the same. GCF for 6, -3, and 12, you can type it in like I did on the previous one. It's 3. 6s don't divide into 3, but they do divide into 6 and 12, but it's got to work for all of them. So 3s, 3, 6, 9, 12, they're definitely in the 3 times table. X cubed, and x squared. So pick the smallest. That would be x squared. Y squared, y, and y. The smallest one would be y. So it's between these 2. We've just got to figure out which one it is. So divide each of the terms by 3x squared y. And as this is multiple choice, I'm only going to have to do the first one because I can see these 2 answers are different here. 6 divided by 3 is 2. And I now know it's this one because this one says 3. X cubed divided by x squared, 3 take away 2 is 1, so that's x to the 1. and y squared, and I think that's supposed to be a y. That's like the worst y I've ever drawn. Would be y to the 1, which is also a y. So I'm not going to finish off the question because that's the only possible answer it can be now at this point. Now, the last questions are the ones that we saw earlier. We talked about how we noticed we could use the grid to begin with. And then rather than saying what this times what gives us this, we can actually say it the other way around by just dividing these first terms and dividing these last terms as well. Remember, the x doesn't play any part in this. We could work out the answer without looking at those rectangles. So we don't pay any attention to the 6x in this question. X squared divided by x, 2 take away 1 is 1. So it's x to the 1. Positive 8 divided by positive 4 is positive 2. Of course, you don't need to say x to the 1. You can just say x. Same question as we're dividing by a binomial. I'm going to divide the first terms and the last terms. X squared divided by x is x. Negative 10 divided by negative 5 is 2. And I'm finished. Same again. Quotient means divide. You can see that from the fraction anyway. 2x squared divided by x, numbers first, 2. And then x squared divided by x again is x. Negative 4 divided by 4 is negative 1. And we've got that answer. So these questions actually are kind of quick once we know what we're looking for. Divided by a binomial again, so first terms and last terms. X squared divided by x is x, and negative 16 divided by 4 is negative 4. All of these, of course, you can do on a calculator if you're not sure. 2x squared divided by x, numbers first, 2. X squared divided by x again, that would be x. And last terms, negative 14 divided by negative 2 is positive 7. Check on Desmos if you're not sure. And our last question is a word problem. So this is the area question. So we know the two factors together multiply to make the area. So therefore, if we divide the area by one of the lengths, it will tell us what the other one is. So 3x squared plus 2x, minus 8 divided by 3x minus 4. We will divide the first terms and we'll divide the last terms again as well. I'm putting a negative 4 right over there just to make it a little easier. There's the first terms and there's the last terms. 3x squared divided by 3x. 3 divided by 3 is 1. And x squared divided by x is x. So 1x, which actually they all say on this one. And then negative 8 divided by negative 4 is 2, positive 2. And we have our answer. That's the end for this one. That's exactly how you do those. Make sure you're familiar with those methods before you start. Make sure you check in carefully on Desmos, GCFs, and also any calculations with negative numbers as well to improve the accuracy. And that's the end for this video.